The great law of time and space. 61. As for all the expressions used in Kabbalah wisdom that refer to time and space, know that it is not said, as one might think, of time and space ordinary to the material world, for here everything is above time and above space. But all the words, kodam, i.e., before, and ahar ka, i.e., then, after that, mean cause and effect, for we call cause before, and we call effect after. For every cause precedes the consequence that follows from it. And the notions of up and down, of up and down, of the descending are the measures of aviyat, literally thickness, which is a metaphor of selfishness and impurity, and zakut, i.e., purity, for aliyah, i.e., ascent, means purification, and yerida, i.e., descent, means hidavat, i.e., the formation or increase of aviyat. And when we say that the lower stage has risen upward, it means that the lower stage has purified itself and become quite as pure as the higher stage, and therefore it is said to have merged with it, for qualitative similarity leads to the fusion of spiritual objects with each other. And also when we say that the inferior has clothed the supreme, it means that the lower one has acquired a qualitative resemblance to the outer part of the supreme, for the fusion with the outer part of the supreme we call the putting on of the supreme. As well as all the other things that spoken of time or space you should understand in this way, i.e., as the corresponding spiritual categories. Two differences between the first three Spirit Parsifs and the Vav Zavat Parsifs. 62. Each Parsif is created, endowed with light, and born of the Masa Guf of the Supreme Parsif, and this process is causal in nature. And it is manifested in all Parzafs, from the Parzaf of the Keter, world, Adam Kadmon, which appeared after the first Simsum, to the end of the Parzafs, of the world, Asya. And they clothe each other, i.e., each inferior one clotheth the Guf of the superior in relation to him. And for an explanation of the concept of Parzaf, see above, in N. 57. 63. And these Parzafs are divided into the Parzafs of the first three Sphirit, i.e., the Parzaf of Keter, the Parzaf of Hakma and Parzaf Bina, and into Parzaf Vav Savat, i.e., the Parzaf of the seven lower spirit of Bina, called Yisrael Sava Yudvuna, Parzaf Zir Anpin, and Parzaf Malhat. And these three Parzafs are considered the Parzafs of Vav Savat, and even when they acquire the first three spirit, they do not leave the steps of Vav Savat. For they lack the Keter, the Hakma, and the Bina from their beginnings. As it is written in the book of Zohar, on the weekly reading of Mishpatim, N. 520, the king's supremacy is established by mercy and power. In Kabbalistic terms, Rosh Zir Anpin is established, or corrected, with the help of spirit Hezd and Vura. See what it says. And there is a difference between the Parsifs of the first three spirit and the Parsifs of Vav Savat, both in how they appear and are born, and how they clothe the Guf of the highest. For the Parsifs of the three of the first spirit arise from the Pe Darash of the Supreme, which is directly above them, which originates from the Parzaf of the Kathir, of the world, Adam Kadmon, for after the Parzuf of the Kathir appeared, of the world, Adam Kadmon, forming Rosh and Guf, as written above, in Paras. 5-6, there arose a collision of the surrounding light with the inner light in the 10-spirit de Guf. It is meant that that light, which Aviat Masaha prevents from entering the Guf Partsuf, is called or Makif, i.e., the surrounding light. And he began to hit the Aviat Masaha, i.e., he began to counteract the Aviat Masaha, so that inner light clothed with his returning light, and because of this collision of the surrounding light with Aviat Masaha, the Masa who is in Guf was purified and gained the same properties that the Masak who is in Zivig and who is in Rosh Partsuf possesses, and because of this, it is believed that the Masak de Guf ascended and entered the Masak that is in the Pedarash. Within the limits of the Zivig occurring there, for the coincidence of the properties is considered a merger, and therefore, through the joining to the Zivig taking place in Rosh, all the stages of Aviat inherent in Masa except for the last step, and then the Zivig Da'aka corresponding to it began of the part of the highest light that is in Rosh, or rather, corresponding to the measure of Aviat remaining in Masaka, i.e., the Aviat of Bina Gimel, and the level of the Partsufa. Corresponding to this, Aviat, appeared Hakma. And then it became discernible that Masak sprang from another stage, for the supreme is the parts of Keter, and that new level that Masak found is the level of Hakma, for the reason that the last Bina was lost, and the fact that it becomes discernible is considered a birth, i.e. he emerged from the level of Kathar and became a special Partsuf, who has only the level of Hakma. 4. The source of the born Parzuf Hakma is the Masa de Guf of the level of the Keter, who has purified himself and risen to the Pe Darash. And the place of this emergence and birth is the Pe Darash of the parts of Kathir, as about all this is written in the introduction to the Wisdom of Kabbalah, page 35, read it. And after the parts of Hakma was born and emerged from the Pedarash of the parts of Kathir, it is believed that he only put on the Guf of the parts of Keter, i.e., we are talking about the first 3 Spirit de Guf, representing Hezd, Vura, Tefereth, for Masa de Guf is its source, from which it was born, and it covers only the outer part of the Guf Parzuf Kathir. For the level of the Bina Gimel is the outer part of the Parzuf Kater, as its level derives from the returning light of Bina Dalit. And hence it is considered an endowment that indicates a merging with the outer part, as already said. 64. And exactly as it was explained at the birth of the parts of Hakma, of the world, Adam Kadmon of Pe Darash parts of Keter, of the world, Adam Kadmon, the parts of Bina of the Pe Darash parts of Hakma appeared, for after the complete formation of the parts of Hakma, both Rosh and Guf, there was again a collision of the ambient light with the inner light, purifying the Aviat Masaha and leading to it becomes qualitatively identical to the Masa Malhut Rosh, and since it has been incorporated into the Zivig Rosh, a stage of inherent Aviat was once again created apart from the last, lost, stage, and in accordance with the amount of Aviat remaining in him, i.e., the Aviat of Bina Beth, the 10 Spirit of the level of Bina. And since it became discernible that this was the lowest stage compared to the parts of Hakma, it is believed that he separates from parts of Hakma, and is born gaining power over, but it vests in the guf of the Supreme, for from there flows its source, as already mentioned, and he also clothed the first three spirit de guf, which are in the place of Hezd, Vura, and Tefereth. 65. And in exactly the same way the three partsufa of Vav Zavat appeared, i.e., Yisrael Sava Yudvuna and Zir Anpin and Malhut, but there are two differences in them. 1. In them the inferior does not emerge from the Pedarash Supreme, adjoining it, but from the Pedarash, Partsuf, which is above the Supreme in relation to it. In relation to it. For Zir Anpin, for example, does not emerge from the Pe Darash, Partsuf, of Yisrael Sava Yudvuna, but after Yisrael Sava Yudvuna became one Partsuf with Aba Vima, being above the highest in relation to him. Also, the Nukva does not appear from the Pedarash Zir Anpin, but after Zir Anpin ascended to Aba Vima. And also the parts of Attic, world, Atzalut did not emerge from the first Rosh, world, Nikudim, but from the Rosh, Partsuf, Sag, world, Adam Kadmon. The reason for this is that these Roshim, being a step of Vav Zavat, from their inception, are not suitable for Zivug with the higher light so much so that they can create and endow the light the inferior parts of. 2. The second difference concerns endowment, for the Parzufs of Vav Savat do not endow the three first spirit degufs of the Supreme in relation to them, i.e., Hezd, Vura, Tefereth, but the Vav Savat deguf of the highest, i.e., Netzach, Had, Yesed, which are from Haza and below. For being Vav Savat, beginning from their origin, they cannot establish themselves within the first three spirit deguf of the highest. Thus, the two distinctions between the partsufs of the first three Sphirit and the Parzufas of the Vav Savat. One concerns their appearance, for only the Parsufs of the three first spirit emerge from the Pe higher adjacent to them. In contrast, the Parsufs of Vav Savat emerge from the Parsufs above the Supreme. And one concerns the endowment, for only the Partsufas of the three first spirit can establish themselves within Hezd, Vura, and Tefereth of the highest, which are the preeminent Spirit deguf. In contrast, the Partsufas of the Vav Savat are anchored only from Haze and below, i.e., only in Vav Savat deguf. 3 factors for the origin of the inferior Parzuf. 66. 3 factors are necessary in order for the Zivug, which generates the lowest Partuf, to occur. The factor the first is Masa, connecting with the higher light in the Zivug Da'aka, i.e., in the connection. Arising out of opposition, and raising the light, returning and clothed with the higher light, for to what extent the returning light embraces the higher light, such is the level of the lowest, as it is written in the introduction to the Wisdom of the Kabbalah, N. 21, read this, and thus, after Masa caused all the Parzufs and steps in the world of Nikudim to appear, they could not resist, but broke and ceased to exist, and Masa purified all the 5 Aviat steps present in him, and returned to Rosh, Partsufa, Sag, as it is written in the doctrine of the 10 Spirit, Part 8, verses 2 and 4, read this, with all the steps appearing in the world of Nikudim, left their Rashomot in Masa, and so when Masa joined the Zivug, taking place on Rosh, Partsav, Sag, his former Rashomot reappeared in him, and first Masa manifested the highest of the steps available to him, namely, the Rashomot of the Partsav Kathir, called Partsav, Attic, of the world, Asalat, i.e., Aviat Bina Dalit, and the other Rashomot, who remained in Masa at the birth of Partsav, Attic, went out to the place of this, Partsav. And after the Partsav, Attic was fully formed, there occurred in it the Zivug Day Kaa, corresponding to the highest stage of those that remained in the Masa available in it, i.e., the Bina Gimel, and manifested corresponding to this, Masak, the level of Arianpan. And the rest of the Rashomot that are available in Masaka and who have not yet caused the Zivug Day Kaa, at the birth of the Arianpan have descended to the place of the Arianpan. When the Partsav, Arianpan, was fully formed, there occurred in him a Zivug corresponding to the highest stage of those that remained in Masa, i.e., Bina Beth, and manifested the level of Abaveim. And so onward in exactly the same way. For all the Parzufas appear by virtue of the Zivug Da'aka of the Supreme Light with Masak. 67. Factor 2 is that the Kathar and the Hakma of each inferior are attached to the Bina, Tifereth, and Malhut of the highest in relation to them. Therefore, when the formation of the highest is completed and he raises his Bina, Tifereth, and Malhut, then together with them in the place of the highest are also lifted up by Keter and Hakma of the lowest, as all this is described in detail above. In N20, read this, and join with the Zivug of the highest, and thus each inferior acquires its level from the Zivug of Rosh the highest. 68. The third factor is that Zir Anpin ascends to Partsav, Yisrael Savat and combines and complements the light of the right and left lines of the Partsav, Yisrael Savayutvan, and without the lifting of Zir Anpin to ascend Ma'in Nukvan, the right and left lines of Partsav, Yisrael Savayutvan, could not shine. Consequently, Zir Anpin's ascension to the Partsav of Yisrael Savayutvana caused three lines to appear, right, left, and middle, representing Hakma, Bina, Da'at, Partsav, Yisrael Savayutvana. And there is a law that the inferior is also graced with any amount of light shining in the highest because of him, and so Zir Anpin receives these Mohin Hakma, Bina, Da'at from Partsav, Yisrael Savayutvan. And this is the meaning of the words, three appeared out of one abides in three, as it is written in the book of Zohar, on the weekly reading of Bereshit, Vol. 276, beginning with the words, in addition, the reference is unsupported. In page 52 there is a supporting reference, the book of Zohar, on the weekly reading of Bereshit, Volume 1, N. 363, and as about all this is written above in page 52, read that. Here is an explanation of the three factors concerning the Zivug, generating the lower one. 69. And it turns out that the basis of Zivug, leading to the emergence of the inferior, in fact, is Zivug Da'aka, i.e., arising from the opposition of Masa to the Supreme Light, as it has already been said. For it is he who determines what the height of the inferior will be, as is known. However, it is necessary to awaken the Ma'in Nukvan of the inferior, and such awakening, in fact, leads to the Keter, and the Hakma of the lower adheres to the Bina, the Tifereth, and the Malhut of the higher. Therefore, both are necessary for the emergence of the inferior parts of. And as for Zir Anpin, there is an additional circumstance, for his Masak does not attract the vessels of the first three spirit, being the Masak of Bina Aleph, and because of this the highest cannot give him Mokin from the Zivig Masak with the highest light, and consequently, the action of the third factor mentioned above is necessary, so that because of it he to receive Mohin from the Supreme in relation to him. According to the meaning, written, 3 have arisen out of one abides in 3. This has already been mentioned. 3 stages in which the 10 Sphirith appear. 70. The first stage refers to the first Parsifs of the world, Adam Kadmon, where immediately appeared all the 10 Sphirith, because during the Zivig day Kaa, corresponding to the Masa of Bina Dalit, the 10 Sphirith of the level of Qatar appeared. And during the Zivig day Kaa, which corresponds to Masa Bina Gimel, the 10 Sphirith of the level of Hokmah appeared. And during the Zivig day Kaa, corresponding to Masahu Bina Beth, the 10 Sphirith of the level of Bina appeared. 71. The second stage is the world of Nikudim, which appeared in accordance with the Masaka of Bina Aleph, connected with Malhut, and in the world of Nikudim, the 10 Sphirith appeared in 2 periods of time. For first Malhut ascended to the Bina, Partsufa, Sag, of the world, Adam Kadmon, and then, when Masak to Sag, which belongs to China Aleph, which is called Nikvai Einam, i.e., the pupils of the eyes, Malhut ascended and united with Bina Aleph. And she completed the step below Hakma, called Einam, i.e., the eyes, and consequently only 2 vessels remained on the step, the Keter and Hakma, along with the 2 lights, Ruah, Nefesh, and the 3 vessels, Bina, Tifereth, and Malhut, fell from the step. And this is called Katnut, of the world, Nikudim. And at the time of Gadlut the 3 vessels, Bina, Tifereth, and Malhut returned to the step and completed it to 5 vessels Kathir, Hakma, Bina, Tifereth, and Malhut, along with the 5 lights, Nefesh, Ruah, Neshama, Hea, Yaida, as explained above, in point 19. Here it is explained that in the world of Nikudim the 10 Sphirith did not appear at once, as in the first 3 Parsifs of the world, Adam Kadmon, but they appeared in 2 periods of time, in the time of Katnut and in the time of Katnath. Only 2 of the Sphirith appeared in the time of Katnath, and in the time of Gadlut the other 3 Sphiriths appeared. 72. The third stage is the world of Asalat, in which the 10 Sphirith appeared in 3 periods of time, called Iber, i.e., pregnancy, Enika, i.e., breastfeeding, and Mohin, the name of the light, meaning brains. For here, in the world of Asalat, the cleansing of Masa was added at the last level, as the Masak was purified from the China Aleph, which is called the Nikvai Einam, and turned into Masak corresponding to the Aviyat of China Shorish. This is explained in the Introduction to Wisdom of the Kabbalah, endpoint 21. Since the returning light corresponding to it clads only the level of the light of Malhut in the vessel of the Keter, called Metzak, i.e., the forehead. And therefore this light is called by the name Ma appearing from Metzak. For Keter, Hakma, Bina, Tefereth, and Malhut Darash are called Galgalta, i.e. skull, forehead, Einam, i.e. eyes, Ozen, i.e. ear, Hotham, i.e. nose, Pe, i.e. mouth. Metzak is a Galgalta. And so they need two descents of Malhut here. 1. For her to descend from Metzak to Nikvai Inaim, and this is called Enika. 2. That she descends from Nikvai Inaim to her place in Pe. And this is called Mokin. Thus, the first level, appearing in accordance with Masak Aviyat Shorish, is called Yibber. And the second level, appearing in accordance with the Masaka, arising, after the descent of Malhut to Bina Aleph, is called Enika. And the third level, appearing in accordance with the Masa, that arose, after the descent of Malhut's descent into its place, is called Mohin. So it is explained that in the world of Aselet, the 10 spirit appear in 3 periods of time, called Iber, Enika, Mohin. And the essence of these words will be explained before us.